and welcome back to RSBN CPAC coverage of Orlando 2022. My name is Grace Saldana, and I'm joined by Morse Tan, who is the Dean of Liberty University School of Law. How are you doing, Morse?
I'm doing well. It's great to be with you here.
It's great to have you here. So you have spoken on the main stage. You opened it up with prayer today. So tell us what was your speech about?
My speech was about what's going on in the Korean Peninsula. And you have, on the one hand, the most unjust regime on planet Earth in the North Koreans, and they have turned what was once the center of Christianity in all of Asia, it was called the Jerusalem of the East, into the most despotic, authoritarian, totalitarian regime on the planet. And they have these concentration camps where they are destroying so many people. They have murdered 15 million of their own people in a country of 24 million.
They're horrifying.
And it truly is. But what's astonishing, and a lot of people don't know, is that South Korea, under the Moon administration, is veering to become more like North Korea, as they are leftists and socialists. And in this upcoming presidential election in March, South Korea will have to decide whether they're going to go in a more communist direction or whether they're going to return to a measure of sanity and instead of becoming more like North Korea, continuing along the wonderful path that they have been in being more aligned with the systems that the U.S. has championed for a long time, and that has been a cause of South Korea's rise in the world in many ways. And so the voters in South Korea have a very important choice before them, especially since the South Korean presidency is the most powerful of the three branches of government in South Korea.
That is truly surprising to hear, because I am actually from California originally, and in Los Angeles, there are a lot of Korean Christian churches.
Yes.
And they tend to be very conservative, very family oriented. So that is truly disturbing to hear that South Korea could be swinging more towards communism. And I'm glad we have people like you fighting for awareness of that, as well as people like Yeonmi Kim or Park, who is she's writing books and she's bringing a lot of awareness and doing interviews on Fox about what the brutality of the North Korean regime. And this administration isn't helping.
You know, in the previous administration, people say, oh, what good happened in the last administration in regards to North Korea? A bunch of things. So those who are being held captive in North Korea who are our citizens came home. The missile tests that they were engaging in, and they have nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, the fourth greatest number of units, military units of any military in the world, and there were no missile launches thanks to the Trump administration. And on top of that, the remains of our veterans from the Korean War came home. And so there are many positive things that happened during that time, and yet it's been such a contrast. In January, there are 7 missile launches by North Korea.
Wow.
And so the contrast is rather remarkable, because the path of peace through strength is the better one to go on. And I think the more that this country can return to that path, the better.
And right now, America is hardly leading, but leading from behind is what I would say. There is no leadership under the Biden administration, and under President Trump there was, and you worked closely with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. So what did you do with him during the Trump administration?
So we did multiple things, but the grand finale of what we worked on were the atrocity determinations in regards to the Chinese Communist Party for genocide and crimes against humanity that they are committing against their own people. And the office that I led was a chief policy shop that drove this process from the beginning and got it across the finish line on January 19th. And so the reverberations of that are still going on, as much as the Chinese Communist Party wants to mute it, tamp it down, say nothing. They're trying to say nothing to see here. Let's move on. It's what unjust regimes do all the time when they're committing mass atrocity crimes, which is what is going on.
Right, and now to tie that into current events, there's a lot of rumors going on about Russia invading Ukraine, and could it lead to China taking over Taiwan? What do you think?
there's a massing of Chinese communist forces around Taiwan, and China is also bringing to bear, for example, Air Force jets making incursions into Taiwan's airspace. When I was working in the Trump administration, there was an announcement from the Trump administration that that Taiwan is an independent sovereign country, breaking decades of precedent.
Right.
And so the fact that I was able to meet with a Taiwanese delegation inside the State Department, ambassadorial level delegation, was remarkable and very different from the way things were for decades previously. And so it's very important to regain this peace through strength, otherwise it's encouraging aggression from aggressive rulers in various places around the world who are licking their chops to do what Putin has just done.
And so what are your hopes for 2024 in the presidential election?
I think that the current data that's out there in terms of the American people are indicating what their level of disapproval and dismay is. And so I think both in the congressional midterms as well as in 2024, I think the American people will have a chance to change course and to not continue along the lines of what we've seen in terms of the disaster in Afghanistan, now in Ukraine, potentially in Taiwan, potentially in the Korean Peninsula. There are some profound concerns abroad as well as domestically. The economy is not doing well at all. All the rising prices that have been happening, as opposed to the tremendous job that was done by the previous administration. And so I think the American people are able to see all this, and we'll see if there can be that expression of the will of the people moving forward.
And what do you think American Koreans are on the political spectrum right now? Are they leaning towards another Trump presidency, or are they leaning more liberal?
So Korean Americans can, on the one hand, by the educational and certain media sources, tilt towards the left or to be apolitical. But there's, I think, a growing number of conservative Korean Americans, because in actuality, if you look at the views of Korean Americans in general, I think they align better with the conservative movement than they do with leftist agendas. And so that being the case, I think there's real potential to reach out to Korean Americans and to other minorities, especially when the demographics of America are moving towards America with no majority and nothing but minorities.
Right.
And so I think there's a great opportunity for Republicans, for conservatives, to reach out to minorities of all stripes who actually do hold a lot of the same views and values that conservatism champions.
Absolutely, and I think that's such an important message, because I do wish the Republican Party did more to engage minority communities that are big voting blocs, and they are part of this country, and we just need to bridge the gap a little bit there.
I agree, and I think it can be done.
Yes.
I think there are steps to make it happen, and if there's growth along those lines, I think it would bode well for the movement, and I think there will be fruit born from it.
Yes. How can people keep up with you?
Well, so Liberty Law School, over which I serve as the current dean, has a Facebook page, and so that is a way that they could keep up with me, as well as through my office at Liberty Law School.
Awesome. Okay, well, there you have it, you guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.